For over 15 years, Val Kilmer's name was practically erased from Hollywood's memory. Once a shining star whose roles as Iceman in Top Gun, Doc Holliday in Tombstone, and Jim Morrison in The Doors cemented his place in cinematic history, Kilmer was suddenly pushed out of the spotlight with no clear explanation. From his meteoric rise in the 1980s and 90s to his dramatic fall from grace, the enigma of Kilmer's absence remains one of Hollywood's most haunting mysteries. In 2017, during a candid interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Kilmer admitted to being sidelined by the industry for over a decade, with no major roles coming his way. "I was blacklisted 15 years, and no studio called my name," he said bitterly. These weren't just the words of a fading star. There was something deeper at play, something darker hidden beneath the surface. His sudden disappearance from the screen wasn't solely due to the struggles of throat cancer, which Kilmer battled privately for years. There was another much darker reason. For his vanishing act, Kilmer had openly defied Hollywood's unspoken powers, and that, it seems, had cost him his career. It wasn't just a matter of being difficult on set or failing to deliver performances. He had stood up to forces far more powerful than him, and in doing so, had sealed his own fate in the industry. His defiance didn't go unnoticed, and it didn't come without consequences. When Kilmer passed away on April 1, 2025, the coroner's report revealed unsettling details that painted a grim picture of the final years of his life. Severe malnutrition, high doses of opioids, and an untreated infected surgical wound raised suspicions about the forces that led to his demise. The medical findings seemed too deliberate, too damning to ignore. Kilmer's close friend, Mel Gibson, had stayed silent for years about the true cause of his friend's downfall. But when Kilmer died, Gibson finally spoke out, revealing that Kilmer had been blacklisted by the industry, not because of his health, but because he dared to challenge Hollywood's power structures. The question looms large. Who was responsible for putting Val Kilmer on this infamous blacklist? Was it simply a matter of him falling out of favor with the studios? Or was there something more sinister at play? Hollywood, often glorified as a land of dreams and creative freedom, has a dark side that many refuse to acknowledge. Could it be that? Kilmer's attempts to defy the hidden powers of Hollywood were the final nail in his career's coffin. The details of Kilmer's life and death reveal a much larger conspiracy that goes beyond a simple case of celebrity fallout. Join us as we dive into the shocking revelations that uncover the grim realities of Hollywood's powerful undercurrent. We must travel back in time to when Val Kilmer was the brightest star in Hollywood. In the 1990s, Kilmer had everything: talent, fame, and a string of iconic performances that made him a household name. His role as Iceman in Top Gun helped define an entire generation, while his portrayal of Doc Holliday in Tombstone brought an intensity to the screen that captivated audiences. Kilmer's dedication to his craft was undeniable, and his ability to portray complex, brooding characters set him apart in Hollywood. In 1995, he solidified his place as a cinematic legend when he took on the role of Bruce Wayne in Batman Forever. His performance in the iconic superhero role was unlike any other. Batman wasn't just a masked vigilante. It was a brooding, keen, introspective figure whose enigmatic qualities added depth to the character. Batman Forever grossed over $330 million globally, according to Box Office Mojo, and Kilmer was celebrated as one of the most iconic actors of the 1990s. But it was on the set of Batman Forever that the first cracks in Kilmer's perfect career began to show. According to director Joel Schumacher, tensions on set were high. In 1996, Schumacher referred to Kilmer as a storm beyond control. In an interview with The Independent, he described Kilmer as rude and psychotic, adding that the actor's behavior was unpredictable and difficult to manage. But despite the volatile relationship between Kilmer and Schumacher, the film's success seemed to overshadow their conflicts. However, 2 years later, Kilmer was replaced by George Clooney for Batman and Robin, and his career began to spiral downward. After Batman Forever, Kilmer's presence in Hollywood was no longer the same. Despite his starring roles in films like The Saint, he was gradually pushed out of major projects. By 1998 and 1999, Val Kilmer, once the shining star of Hollywood, had disappeared from the big screen entirely. In 2017, during a Reddit AMA and an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Kilmer revealed the painful truth about his career. "I was blacklisted for 15 years, he confessed, admitting that he hadn't received a single call. From a major studio, he quickly followed up with an uncertain response. Maybe not exactly. The hesitation in his voice was telling, as if he were under pressure to maintain the silence. Kilmer's confession raised more questions than it answered. What had really happened to the star who had once captivated audiences? The idea of being blacklisted in Hollywood was not something often discussed, but Kilmer's words, along with confessions from close friends like Mel Gibson, confirmed the existence of a powerful, unseen force that had pulled the strings behind the scenes. Gibson revealed that Kilmer had been well-connected in Hollywood and had refused to bow to the pressure of the industry's unspoken rules. Kilmer had become a target for those powerful figures determined to maintain control over the industry. Kilmer's infamous reputation for being difficult on set was often used as an excuse to explain his sudden absence from major roles. Director Joel Schumacher's criticism of Kilmer during Batman Forever painted him as a problem actor, a label that stuck. Yet as we now know, this was merely a facade. The truth was that Kilmer's challenges with the industry weren't about personal shortcomings or bad behavior. They were about his refusal to bow to the unspoken rules of Hollywood, a system controlled by the rich and powerful who ensured that only those who played by their rules would thrive. Kilmer's decision to challenge this system ultimately led to his ostracism from major studios, and his career was effectively destroyed. In the years that followed, Kilmer's name faded from Hollywood's memory. His health declined dramatically after being diagnosed with throat cancer, and he underwent a tracheotomy, which robbed him of his voice. The pain of illness was compounded by the emotional toll of isolation as Kilmer continued to retreat from the public eye. Despite his struggles, Kilmer refused to seek sympathy. Instead, he focused on his art and his family. The 2021 documentary Val gave audiences a glimpse into the mind of an artist struggling to come to terms with the fame he had once known, and the pain he had endured in silence. Kilmer's isolation was not simply a result of illness, it was a direct consequence of being blacklisted by Hollywood. The industry that had once celebrated him now turned its back on him, leaving him to fight alone in the shadows. His brief return to the screen in Top Gun, Maverick marked a rare moment of redemption. But Kilmer soon vanished again, retreating into a quiet life far removed from the industry that had once defined him. Val Kilmer's mysterious absence from the limelight, after a meteoric rise in Hollywood, was not the result of some personal failure or bad luck. Instead, it was part of a calculated campaign to silence him for daring to challenge the powerful figures behind the curtains of the entertainment industry. The truth of his disappearance began to emerge only after his passing, and through the confessions of those close to him. The details of Kilmer's career demise became clearer. Kilmer wasn't just forgotten. He was deliberately pushed out of Hollywood, a casualty of a larger system where power and control trumped talent and creativity. As we continue to explore Kilmer's journey, it becomes apparent that his fight was not just against his health struggles, but against a system that sought to crush anyone who dared to defy its hidden rules. The truth about what happened to Kilmer is both a personal tragedy and a stark reminder of the darker forces that control the entertainment industry. But the question remains, why was he targeted? What did Kilmer do that made him such a threat to Hollywood's establishment? The documentary Val, produced by Kilmer himself with the help of his children, offered a rare glimpse into his life. It was a project that revealed the man behind the celebrity, a man who had faced both triumphs and betrayals, who had poured his heart into his craft only to see his career disintegrate in the blink of an eye. In the film, Kilmer didn't lash out against Hollywood, nor did he hold grudges. Instead, he quietly reflected on the years that had been stolen from him, the roles he never got to play, and the dreams that were left unfulfilled. Yet beneath the calm exterior of the documentary, there was a sense of deep pain. It wasn't just illness or age that had taken a toll on Kilmer. It was the abandonment by the industry he had once called home. Despite the illness that ravaged his body and the years of isolation he endured, Kilmer never once attempted to cash in on his tragic story. Unlike so many celebrities who use their struggles for sympathy or publicity, Kilmer remained resolute in his desire for privacy and dignity. This was a man who had been erased from Hollywood, not because of a lack of talent, but because he dared to stand up against the very system that had made him a star in the first place. His refusal to play the game, his refusal to bow down to the unspoken rules of Hollywood, ultimately cost him everything. In 2015, as Kilmer faced the brutal reality of throat cancer, The world saw a man who was no longer the vibrant star of Top Gun or Batman Forever. The disease robbed him of his voice, leaving him unable to speak without the aid of a device. This tragic turn of events only compounded the isolation he had already been experiencing. And yet, even as his health deteriorated, Kilmer never sought to return to Hollywood. He wasn't interested in public sympathy or media attention. Instead, he chose to retreat to his New Mexico ranch, where he could live out his final years in peace, away from the spotlight that had once consumed him. Kilmer's quiet life in the years leading up to his death in April 2025 reflected. A man who had long since given up on the industry that had turned its back on him. His passing, at the age of 65, was met with sadness, but also with questions that remained unanswered even after his death. The coroner's report, which listed pneumonia and acute respiratory failure as the causes of death, was standard in many ways, but the details surrounding his death raised eyebrows. Severe malnutrition, an untreated surgical wound, and high levels of opioids in his blood all pointed to something more sinister. Kilmer, it seemed, had been neglected in his final days. How could a former Hollywood action hero, one of the biggest stars of the 80s and 90s, die in such a state of despair and neglect? This wasn't just a story of illness. It was a story of abandonment by the very industry that had once celebrated him. Mel Gibson, who had remained Kilmer's close friend throughout the years, was one of the few who dared to speak the truth about what had really happened to Kilmer. According to Gibson, Kilmer was more than just a victim of illness. He was a victim of Hollywood's cruel and unforgiving power structure. Val knew too much, Gibson said in an interview after Kilmer's death. Those behind the curtain never forgive. Kilmer had not just refused to play by the industry's rules, he had actively challenged them. And for that, he had been cast out into the shadows, left to wither away, while the industry moved on without him. The whispers of a Hollywood blacklist had been circulating for years, but Kilmer's story brought the reality of that blacklist to light. Kilmer's defiance of the system, his refusal to bow down to the unspoken rules of Hollywood, had made him a target. It wasn't just his behavior on set that had turned people against him. It was his refusal to be controlled, to conform to the industry's demands. Kilmer had dared to speak out against the system, and in doing so, he had sealed his fate. The same forces that had pushed out other stars like Mel Gibson, Wesley Snipes, and Brendan Fraser were at work here. Hollywood's powerful moguls were not interested in talent or artistry. They were interested in control. And anyone who posed a threat to that control was systematically erased. But Kilmer wasn't the only one to suffer at the hands of these unseen forces. His story serves as a stark reminder of the power dynamics that dominate Hollywood, where relationships and influence are often more important than talent or integrity. Right. Blacklist, it seems, is not some relic of the past, but a living, breathing entity that continues to shape the careers of those brave enough to defy the industry's status quo. Kilmer was not the first star to be blacklisted, and he won't be the last. The question now is, how many other talented individuals are out there, struggling in silence, their careers destroyed because they dared to speak out? In the years following his death, Val Kilmer's legacy has been tarnished, not just by his illness, but by the dark forces that conspired to silence him. The questions surrounding his passing, why he was abandoned, why he was left to die in such a state, are questions that no one seems eager to answer. Hollywood, it seems, is content to let Kilmer's story fade into obscurity, burying the truth along with him. But for those who are willing to look beyond the surface, the truth is there, waiting to be uncovered. Kilmer's final years were marked not by bitterness or resentment, but by quiet reflection. He found solace in his art, his family, and his personal journey. The documentary Val provided a glimpse into the heart of a man who had been both a victim and a survivor. Kilmer may have been erased from Hollywood, but he never gave up on himself. In the end, his story is not one of failure, but one of defiance. Defiance against an industry that sought to control him and break him down. Val Kilmer's legacy will not be defined by the roles he played or the fame he achieved, but by the courage he showed in standing up against a system that sought to silence him. And though Hollywood may have tried to erase him, Kilmer's story will live on. a testament to the power of integrity and the cost of speaking the truth.